Power used to travel through borders, armies, and oil pipelines. Now it moves through satellites, fiber lines, and login credentials. Here's what nobody tells you. In the modern world, cutting internet access can be more effective than deploying troops. And restoring it, selectively, strategically, can reshape an entire political landscape without firing a single shot. That is why reports about Donald Trump discussing connectivity with Elon Musk matter far beyond headlines. This is where the pattern begins. Since the early 2000s, governments under pressure have learned the same lesson again and again. When people can't coordinate, movements stall. In 2009, during Iran's Green Movement, access to social media allowed protests to scale rapidly before authorities responded. In 2019, during fuel price protests, internet shutdowns lasted nearly a week, costing the economy an estimated $1.5 billion and sharply reducing protest momentum. In 2022, amid nationwide unrest, connectivity blackouts once again became a primary tool of control, not persuasion, interruption. Here's why this matters. Control of information is no longer just about censorship. It's about timing. When information flows freely, narratives compete. When it stops, the state regains monopoly. This isn't unique to Iran. It's a global playbook. But Iran's repeated use of shutdowns turned connectivity itself into a strategic pressure point, one that external actors began to notice. Let me show you exactly how private infrastructure entered this equation. Over the last decade, satellite-based internet systems have shifted from experimental to operational. They bypass terrestrial controls, borders, and local providers. That changes the balance. When access can't be easily shut off, leverage moves away from governments toward whoever controls the network. Analysts suggest that this is the backdrop for discussions involving Musk's satellite systems, not as charity, but as capability. At first, it looked like a technical issue. Then the bill arrived. Governments realized that control over domestic infrastructure no longer guaranteed control over information. Here's the mechanism. Once connectivity becomes decentralized, enforcement costs rise exponentially. Blocking one provider no longer works. You need to block the sky. Not democracy. Not regime change. Leverage. That's the real story. Some analysts argue that renewed interest from U.S. political figures reflects an understanding that future influence will depend less on sanctions and more on access. Restore connectivity, and you change coordination. Change coordination, and you change incentives, inside and outside the state. The danger wasn't what they saw. It was what they ignored. Because restoring internet access doesn't just empower citizens. It also accelerates confrontation. And the unresolved question is whether this tool stabilizes pressure or triggers a response no one fully controls. When private infrastructure collides with state power, the outcome is never neutral. It's contested. That was the lesson governments learned the first time alternative networks began to function outside national control. In multiple regions over the past decade, from Eastern Europe to parts of Africa, authorities discovered that once communication escaped terrestrial choke points, enforcement shifted from simple shutdowns to constant escalation. Here's what nobody tells you. Connectivity doesn't overthrow systems. It compresses time. It forces decisions sooner. This is where the pattern repeats. When states can no longer fully control information, they face three options: adapt, retaliate, or isolate. Some choose adaptation, integrating new technologies while tightening surveillance. Others retaliate, criminalizing access and punishing users. A third path attempts isolation, building national networks sealed from the outside world. Each choice carries costs. None restore the old equilibrium. Let me show you exactly how this changes incentives. Analysts suggest that satellite-based providers like Starlink alter the strategic map because they convert connectivity into a mobile resource rather than a fixed asset. Fixed assets can be seized. Mobile ones are harder to regulate. When access becomes conditional on equipment rather than infrastructure, power fragments, not freedom, optionality. At first it looked like a workaround, then the bill arrived. Governments facing decentralized access must decide whether to escalate enforcement, negotiate control, or absorb the loss of monopoly. Each response reshapes internal legitimacy. Crackdowns raise resistance. Tolerance weakens authority. Negotiation signals vulnerability. Here's the mechanism. Control of information has diminishing returns once alternatives exist. Some analysts argue that this is why discussions around restoring access are not about altruism. They're about leverage calibration. Restore limited connectivity, and you test responses. Expand it, and you observe adaptation. Restrict it again, and you measure resistance. This isn't chaos. It's pressure mapping, not liberation, not collapse, constraint. That distinction matters. Internet access alone does not determine political outcomes, but it changes coordination costs, speeds narrative competition, and narrows the window for denial. In that environment, missteps compound quickly. Here's the trap. Observers assume more information always leads to better outcomes. It doesn't. It leads to faster ones, faster escalation, faster backlash, faster exposure of internal fractures. Some scenarios indicate that expanded access could stabilize tensions by venting pressure. Others suggest it could accelerate confrontation if expectations outpace reality. Both remain possible. Here's why this matters. The real shift isn't about one country or one figure. It's about who controls the modern equivalents of roads, ports, and pipelines. When those assets belong to private actors, state power becomes conditional, negotiated, temporary. And that leaves the final question unresolved. If information is now a resource, and access is the lever, who ultimately decides when it flows, when it stops, and at what cost? Because in the next phase of geopolitics, wars won't always be announced. Some will be logged in.